All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the My Block Counts Community Block Assessment Workshop and Demonstration Session. My name is Joseph Galarraga. I am a faculty assistant at the Center for Community Engagement, Environmental Justice, and Health, working with Dr. Wilson. And we have been developing this tool, the My Block Counts tool, for many years now. It at first took the form of a paper survey, and now we're working on creating a mobile and web-based app so that communities may assess their immediate environments at the level of the neighborhood block for amenities and hazards to better understand the environmental justice implications of where they live. So I'm going to start now, and I appreciate you all being here. And after I go through this introduction, we'll hopefully be able to show you the tool and how it works in its current state. So thanks so much. So here's a little bit of our outline, things that we're going to be doing today in this session. We're going to be learning about environmental justice, though I think probably most of you, if not all of you, don't need too much of an introduction there. We're going to explore various types of policies that shape our communities. We're going to discuss the community role in collecting data and what you can do with that data to uplift people. I'm going to do a demonstration of the tool to show how you can use it to conduct a review of the block. And yeah, and at the end, I'll do a run through and show more of the tool. So a quick background on the center. So if you attended yesterday's day of the symposium, you probably know a lot of the background on CEEJH and how it was founded 10 years ago. Part of this year's symposium is celebrating that. CEEJH was founded by Dr. Wilson, associate professor at the Maryland Institute for Applied Environmental Health. And CEEJH's primary focus is to provide engagement to highly and differentially exposed populations in underserved communities. And that's what we intend to do with this tool. We hope that this tool is a tool that can be used by community members to do science within their own communities, and then to use the information that's collected through that scientific inquiry to make change, connect with policymakers, connect with other people in the community to build power within the community as well. So yeah, that's the whole reason for the My Block Counts tool. So maybe we can start. Everybody, it would take like a minute or so. Feel free to unmute yourself. Say some things that you maybe like or dislike about your community where you live. Anybody want to share? Okay, I can talk about some of the things that I'll just give a little example. So one of the things that I like about where I live is that there's a lot within walking distance. I don't have to necessarily drive if I want to go, get some healthy food. I can just walk down the street. I can ride my bike to the grocery store, something that I do when I need to pick up a few little things. But one of the things that I dislike is that I moved from a neighborhood that had a whole lot of trees recently in Baltimore. It was, you could walk down the street and you could never break a sweat because you're always in the shade. And now where I live, even though there's more within walking distance, there are considerably less trees. So sometimes on a hot day, you got to make sure that you're drinking plenty of water and you might want to get inside quickly. So that's just an example of some things that, some things that are great and some things that could use some improvement. Anybody else want to share?
I can share.
Oh, thank you.
I really like the location of my community. It's really close by a lot of things, a lot of resources, also the Beltway or 295. And I dislike that my community is a little bit segregated. Like the old section is not as welcoming or inclusive as to newer areas that I would like it to be.
Well, thank you for sharing, Michelle. I appreciate that. And I think that the goal of this tool is to maybe account for some of the things that we want to improve and account for and also take stock of the things that are those resources, like you said. So appreciate you sharing that. So let's start by going over environmental justice. I think there's a lot of different ways to define environmental justice. That, you know, the EPA has their definition, but the definition that Dr. Wilson likes to use, and I like to use as well, is this here. And this is by Bunyan Bryant, who was a sort of one of the you know, elder statesmen of the EJ movement. So describing environmental justice as when people can realize their highest potential without experiencing isms. And when we talk about isms, we're talking about racism, sexism, classism, those factors that really keep people from reaching their highest potential, things that are keeping people down, right? Um, and I think the other thing that you know, environment is really the key word in environmental justice. And the next parts of this definition, I think, are all facets of the environment that I'm maybe, you know, going into my understanding of environmental justice didn't really even conceptualize as part of the environment. But when you have, you know, a decent paying and safe job, quality schools and recreation, decent housing, adequate healthcare, this is all part of the ecosystem that you live in, right? If you're able to get, you know, you live in close proximity of your job, that's part of your immediate environment. There's democratic decision making and personal empowerment. So having agency, if you live in a community where you don't have agency to make any change, then you can say that your environment's not supporting you. That you are not able to reach your highest potential due to the barriers that are presented within your environment. And additionally, communities are free of violence, drugs, and poverty. All of these things have the ability to interfere with your ability to thrive, your ability to reach that highest potential. One of the things that I think about here is that where communities are culturally and biologically diverse as well. So not only is there we see that biologically diverse, you know, people often talk about biodiversity as being a big issue when it comes to how land is managed. But if you have an environment that supports all sorts of different kinds of life, you can see how that allows for the whole ecosystem to work together, and also the cultural diversity that there's people can celebrate who they are, where they come from. That's also part of the environment as well. If you can't celebrate your roots, you can't celebrate you know, your history, things like that. That is you know, a big detriment of the environment. And then the last part here is where distributive justice prevails. Basically, that when I read that, I think of equity. That, you know, everybody has the same opportunities. So that's the definition of EJ that we like to use here, that I like to use as well. And I think that what we're going to talk about now is environmental justice and planning and zoning policies, because, you know, planning and zoning, as we can see here, it shapes all aspects of our communities. So if we have these policies that shape how our communities, how our environment is run, then you can see how that might affect your environmental justice concerns, right? If there's a policy stating that you can't, you know, use your land for farming, or this land can't be developed to, you know, build more housing, you can say, oh well, and then we might not have enough safe housing in the community, things like that. Anyway, we'll dig into it more here. The difference between planning and zoning. I think that there's a lot of confusion here sometimes, even within myself, about, all right, so what is you know, what are planning and zoning? What do we mean by that? But I think that this is the best way that helps me remember the difference. And that is that planning is, you know, the design of cities and other areas, communities, things like that. And it focuses on the management and use of lands, roads, buildings, and more. While zoning is really the law that determines how the space is used in a community for human activity and development. So I think that it's, you know, there's kind of one begets the other in some way. So let's say that you are an urban planner and you want to, build a mixed use building where there's residences, there's apartments, and then there's also maybe retail or a food market below. Well, if the area is zoned for it to be completely residential, you might not be able to build that sort of space, right? So even though you had a plan, because of the zoning, you can't actually carry that out. Um, and you can see that how maybe how zoning laws might affect whether or not somebody's immediate environment is supporting their highest potential. So it may be in this case, because that food market isn't built underneath the apartment, then you might have to travel further to get some healthy food options. So here we have, yeah, some city neighborhood community blocks. And these are, there's a number of examples that we want to point out here that are, um, factors, things that you might come across every day, walking around or driving in a car or sitting on your porch, even looking out, that are shaped by planning and zoning policies, whether it be how the city was designed or the laws that were put into place that allow for certain features to be present. So one of the things that I want to bring up first is we see there are trees over right along the street here. And that's something that I brought up when I was talking about something that I don't necessarily like about my community, is that you can walk up and down the street and there's no trees. But that's a decision that's made. And, that's a decision that has, even though something very small can have a lot of impact, you can have impact on personal health. So if you're able to walk around and be in the shade, maybe at less risk for heat related illness, things like that. So sidewalk widths. I think that this is a decision that's made in the planning and design of cities that is becoming more important than ever when we think about disease transmission and COVID-19. If we're supposed to keep 6 feet away from each other, but our sidewalks maybe don't allow for that because we have really narrow sidewalks, you might say that that could also have bearing on public health and community health, and maybe have some environmental justice concerns as well. If you live in a community where something like COVID-19 or the flu easily transmits, then we might have to think about how can we make this environment better support individual and community health. Here we have a fast food location. This is a zoning consideration. If the area is zoned for fast food locations, I know a lot of times I live in Baltimore, and there's lots of hearings about the opening of new restaurants and bars and things like that. And the thought is well, maybe they're not providing healthy food. They're going to bring a lot of commotion to the block, especially if you're selling alcohol. And people don't necessarily want that in their community. And is that supporting? Is that the kind of food option that you want to have in your area? Fast food, or do you want healthier food? Job locations as well. If you live close to your job, maybe you can get there very easily. Can maybe walk, or even if you have to drive your car, it's a short car ride as opposed to a really long car ride that's going to put more and more pollution into the air, and once again affect the quality of the environment. Open space, green space, parks, that is extremely important. There's so many different connections that studies that have been done in public health that connect green space to mental health outcomes, the ability to go and sit in the park and relax, and what that does for stress, how the effect that that has on people. And also physical health. If you have a place where you can go and exercise and can go out and walk, you see reductions in cardiovascular disease outcomes, things like that. School locations. I think that this is something that a lot of people are keenly aware of. Are the schools near where I live? Are they good? Is this an environment that's going to be supportive of my children? Are they going to be able to learn in a way that's safe? Like I said, I live in Baltimore, and there's all sorts of schools that during the winter don't have heat. during the summers don't have air conditioning. Then you can see how maybe your school location can even affect your physical health in cases like that. And building heights, these are decisions that also affect your well-being. Maybe your view is blocked by buildings. It's very claustrophobic. You can't see out. You don't have access to, in the same way that green space um, is good for your mental health. If you're constantly surrounded by concrete, things like that, that's certainly a factor that can affect your health outcomes. And then home sizes, this is another thing that if you have an area zone for single family homes, apartments, is this a row house area, things like that. Street widths, once again, kind of like sidewalk widths, but maybe not so much regarding disease transmission. But if you have very narrow streets, maybe more car accidents, maybe any sort of traffic related hazard there. So those are just some examples of how things like zoning, planning, urban planning, community development, these little decisions can have really big impacts on your individual health, the health of your community, the ability for you to connect with your community as well. So hopefully that makes some sense to you all, and maybe thinking about your immediate environment in a way that you haven't before. So I'm going to ask for a little bit more audience participation. You can feel free to use the chat if you're more comfortable with that. I can have that open. Looking at this picture, I want to know what you see here, and maybe some things that you don't see here with regards to some of those things I was just talking about, the immediate environment here, and whether or not you see this as an environment that might support health or well-being or environmental justice.
I see no trees.
No trees. Thank you. Yep. Not enough green space. Thanks. I see where Roxana put that in the chat. Thanks.
I also don't see the sidewalks are pretty small.
Yes, thank you. That's very right.
And the street looks narrow.
And the street looks narrow, very narrow, right? If we have a car parked over here, if another car was driving down, I don't think that you could have two cars pass through here. Thanks. I see Catherine saying low power lines. Yes, exactly. There, you can see those as a hazard as well. Donald says a factory facility, right? And we can see these smokestacks in the back here. This environment does not seem to support health super well. There's not enough green space. Something weird might be going on with the factory facility in the background, right? No space for community engagement, right? Do people have the ability to congregate? That's a good question. There's a vacant lot. Potential ambient air quality issues. The conditions of streets could be an issue for cyclists. Yes, thank you all. These are all very, very good points. And I think that it's just interesting because I've shown this picture to a number of different groups, and I feel like everybody sees things differently, right? People see certain things in the background that I maybe have never even caught before. But I think that I would agree with the assessment that this environment doesn't seem to necessarily promote health super well. One of the most classic environmental justice examples would be the fact that you have people living very close to a polluting facility. So I don't know exactly what the situation is here with, some people have pointed out, it looks like maybe this factory is for rent in the background, something like that. And I think it's important to note that whether or not the facility is currently running or not, at one point it was, and these houses look fairly old. So I think that this is, probably the people that were living here were exposed to some sort of, ambient air quality issues, as we said. So I want to now move to this picture, and if people want to use the chat or like I said, jump in, you can use your voice as well. and see what do we see here in contrast, or maybe some things that maybe are similar as well.
Lots of vegetation.
Lots of vegetation. Yes, exactly. Look, all these trees. So many trees, I can't even count them going all down the street. Some green grass, stuff like that. Anything else? Houses look new or renovated. Promotes active transportation, bike lane. I see that from Donald and Iman. Thank you so much.
The street is one way.
The street is one way. That's a very, very good point. And I think that, lots of communities have one-way streets for, once again, traffic considerations. One-way streets are used for other things as well. It really directs the flow of traffic. So maybe trying to, I'm going to keep using the case of Baltimore because that's where I live and that's where I'm familiar, but there's a number of neighborhoods that previously were segregated that had one-way streets so that people couldn't come in. So that's another, something else to consider about the environment. Anything else? There's a good deal of shade, good for walking. Thanks, Dawood. All right, well, I think that you all are very perceptive and have a good idea of what a healthy, supportive environment looks like. I do want to note that I think that sometimes people will see this picture and they'll even note some things that show that maybe this area could use some improvement as well. There's a lot of cars, right? So maybe this is an area that, despite the fact that we have a bike lane, maybe it'd be nice to get more people in the bike lane. Maybe do some carpooling. I think that one of the things I just want to point out is that there are lots of different ways to think about your immediate environment and how it might be improved to further promote health. So even though this place looks great, I think that it's always good to have that critical eye and think, well, how can we make our community even better for the people that live here? So something to think about. I'm going to move on now here to a framework that Dr. Wilson and a number of members of CEEJH over the years have developed. And that's our way of basically grounding this tool. And why we think that this tool is important and has the ability to shine light onto environmental justice issues. And that's this Environmental Benefits District framework. So here's the framework. I see there's actually quite a bit going on in the framework. But what I think is the really important thing is this transformation that we see at the bottom, right? We have the caterpillar turning into the butterfly. And I like this because it calls back to that definition. We're reaching our highest potential here. We are, going from a caterpillar to a beautiful butterfly, spreading our wings. And that's what we are wanting to do in environmental justice. And I think that part of the reason we chose this butterfly is that this graphic here kind of also looks like a butterfly wing, right? But I think it's important to maybe just go over this a little bit we can get really in depth here, but I wanted to show that this is like meant to be read from left to right. So we have environmental injustice and inequitable risk on the left-hand side. So the communities where some people are disproportionately burdened, right? There's communities of color, low wealth communities bear the brunt of the environmental risk that we see here. And that's what causes environmental justice. And what we're trying to aim for is flourishing communities and environmental justice here on the right-hand side. And so how do we do that? Well, let's first look at these big crossing arrows. I think that this is really the crux of the tool. And we see that here we have pathogens and salutagens. And pathogens, I feel like, is a term that more people are familiar with because you might think about a bacterial pathogen or something. So pathogens are things that make you sick, right? So, but they can also, if you think about it on a larger scale, there can be pathogens that make the whole community sick or unhealthy or unjust. And so in the case of, that scale, when we're talking about pathogens, I think about, cracks in the sidewalk. That's a pathogen. It makes it so that people don't want to try to walk down the street. or going back to the example of the, fast food restaurants or liquor stores or things like that. These are features of the community that are not contributing to its health. In fact, probably taking away from the health of the people who live there in the community as a whole. So we see here this arrow is going down, and we're basically, the goal is to decrease pathogens in the environment, and that is going to reduce risk. If there's less opportunities for you to come in contact with a pathogen, there's less opportunities for risk. And so on the other hand, salutagens are basically the opposite. They're things that are in the environment that are promoting health. So green space, parks, that bike lane that we saw, healthy food options, farmers markets. And we see that we want to increase those. And that's equitable development, where we're making sure that everybody has access to these salutagens, and that we don't have a concentration of pathogens in areas where we have frontline, fence line communities, environmental justice communities. So that's really what's going to ultimately lead here to the equitable development, reducing risk, and having flourishing communities and environmental justice. So we see here that there's various different types of components that would lead to this. Like, we're going to transform our neighborhoods, create economic enterprise zones, have people have the opportunities here to grow their own businesses, to basically try to increase increase the salutagens, health enterprise zones, and then having equitable zoning and planning policy, which is really important based on what we were just going over. And then we also see that just in general, this whole structure, this whole framework here is going to promote health, because it's going to provide economic sustainability. Like if we're having these economic enterprise zones where people are able to have agency within their own community economically, you're sustaining the environment by, if we have a healthier environment that's going to promote human health, it's going to promote the health, it's going to create that biodiversity that we were talking about for all sorts of different species, all sorts of plants and animals. So in general, that's what we're doing here. We're trying to increase pathogens in order to create equitable development, reduce risks for individuals and communities by decreasing the pathogens in the community. And ultimately, we're going to create an environment that supports everybody, regardless of race, class, gender, all of those things that are barriers to environmental justice. So hopefully this framework makes sense. And you'll see that this is really how the tool, it operates on this idea here. So just to go over this a bit more, I want to make sure that everybody's clear on the ideas of salutagens and pathogens. So the salutagens we have on this left-hand side, a park. Look at this. It's very green. All of these trees. There's a picnic table underneath of a tree so you can eat in the shade. This is something that I think most people would want in their community, compared specifically against the thing on the right-hand side, which is a landfill. Maybe even an incineration facility. We see these smokestacks in the background. So they're taking this trash and burning it, and creating, what we call in EJ a sacrifice zone, that anybody who lives in close vicinity of this is essentially a community that's is being sacrificed for the benefit of, so that somebody else doesn't have to have this smokestack in their backyard. That's that NIMBYism, and it's inequitable. So when we're talking about that equitable development, making sure that communities who have faced disamenities like this, first of all, you remove the pathogen, you remove this pathogen from the community, and instead you try to add more health promoting salutogenic features here. So in order to basically take stock of the various pathogens and salutagens that are in the community, to better understand how your immediate vicinity, your immediate environment is supporting or promoting environmental justice, we have developed this community block assessment tool, which does exactly that. So I'm going to go through a bit more about the tool. And this is a tool that allows for basically anybody to conduct a detailed scan of their neighborhoods and identify and document different conditions in the natural and built environment. So the idea here is maybe not only are you going to, through using this tool, recognize that, oh, maybe there's something that's pathogenic, but you have the ability to document it in a way that you can use and compare with other community blocks. Because let's say that you have a lot of people who all go out together and assess different blocks in a neighborhood, you'll be able to compare, and you might be able to say, this one block has, an exorbitant amount of trash compared to the others. Why might that be, and what can we do to fix it? And it might be the case where, oh, this is the block that the garbage truck goes down, and a bunch of stuff falls out as the truck goes down the street. In which case, you come up with like a neighborhood level solution for that. But in the case of where there's something that's maybe more perilous, maybe something that's poses some great harm to a community, such as a landfill or something like that, you be able to use this data collection to organize and build power around that. And so in line with that, we're talking about this another sort of framework that the lab, or the center likes to use, which is community-based participatory research. And so the idea here is that community members who are using this tool are a part of the research process. You're using a scientific method to gather data. And I think that why CBPR, community-based participatory research is important is because, particularly in a case like this, nobody knows the community better than the people who live there. And if we're trying to provide solutions, you want to make sure that the solutions are solutions that the community wants as well. There's not one size fits all solutions necessarily to some issues. So that's why the CBPR method, this community-based participatory research, is important. So funny enough, we had in developing this tool, we had to decide what were we going to count as a neighborhood block. Are we going to talk about the actual block structure where you can look at it above from a map and you can see, oh, that's a square surrounded by four streets. But what we decided is we're doing the block as you might see it in an urban area. Here we have basically, this is the 100 block of public health lane. So basically, when you're using the community block assessment tool, you're really just looking at the area here between Wilson Avenue and Maryland Avenue. So you're going to be looking at all of the features that occur right here, and the tool is built in such a way where this has implications in suburban areas as well, not just urban areas. But if you were to talk about the 100 block in a very rural area, it might not work as well. So we're certainly trying to think of ways to make this tool more applicable for urban settings, or rural settings, but maybe also come up with some sort of companion tool that we might use for that. And so this is the link that you can use to use the My Block Counts app. Oop, I'm going to go back. So as of right now, it exists on the web, and we don't have it necessarily where you can go to the app store and download it. Not quite yet, but it exists on the web, and so you can pull it up on your computer, you can pull it up on your phone, your tablet device, but you use this link here at the bottom, which is https myblockcounts.herokuapp.com. And this is the screen that you'll come to. So we see that we have this login where you can either log in or sign up. And if you've never used the app before, you'll have to sign up. And basically you're entering your username, your email, a password, and that's it. That's the only information that we really collect, because we really want to make the barrier to entry for using this as minimal as possible. So this is basically the information that the bare minimum information that we could collect, but still be able to tie each assessment to a particular area. So you just log in, sign up, create a username, and then you're basically in. So this is my username when I use the app, and it's JRGAL. And then you have the ability to do a number of things. You can start a new block assessment. If you've previously used the app before, you can update an assessment that you have. And then we have this function that's called Search My Block Counts, which in the new updated version actually says it's the data hub. So that you can go and view the data for all of the assessments that you have conducted. So once you get in and you decide that, all right, I'm going to do a new assessment, you can go and you'll see their welcome screen that's comprised of 8 different sections indicated by these different tabs. And each of these tabs represents a group of questions that are related to a number of things that you might encounter on your block. So we have questions, more overall general questions about stores. Like if you live in an area that is mixed use, you might see that you have a number of stores or any sort of retail or food or things like that that might be where you live. Additionally, there's questions about industry, disorder, housing, services, transit, and health. So it's all of the questions are stratified by those various different sections. So this is how you would begin the block assessment. As soon as you start a new block, there's some general information that you collect, such as the address closest to your vantage point. So this is your starting location. We do this as also another way to sort of provide a bit of anonymity. If you like say that you're assessing the block that you live on, but you don't want to put necessarily your home address because you don't feel comfortable doing that, you can just put another address anywhere on the block, because it's not tied to your individual house. All of the information is about the block as a whole, right? So it's not, oh, we need to know where your address is. No, we just need to know the block that you're on. So any address on the block, and then from there we take it and we are able to know that, okay, this accounts for this entire area, in this case between, as we were looking at before, between Wilson Avenue and Maryland Avenue. So basically the data will remain the same if you're at 110 or if you're at 103, because this is what we're looking at here. So just a thought there. And then we also have some questions about weather conditions. And the thought behind that is that maybe the area might look different if it's raining outside. For instance, if we're talking about looking at trash that's in the street, things like that, that can be dependent on, if rain just came through and kind of maybe wash some stuff into the storm drain or things like that. That might also have some bearing on flooding, standing water, things like that. So here are the various menu options as I kind of discussed, but I go into a little bit more detail. So your general block features include a description of the overall street layout and street network. We can see that there are stores, once again, retail, anything like that. Industry, which I kind of ran over a little bit before, but this is really going to refer to those big polluters that we were talking about: landfills, manufacturing, smokestacks, things like that. The disorder tab has to do with the processes or factors by which communities fall into physical disrepair. So there's a lot of discussion here about potholes, broken windows, cracks, signs, missing stop signs, missing speed limit signs, things like that. Housing, the types of places where people live, apartments versus, freestanding homes versus row homes, things like that. Public services are the places where we learn, worship, or play. So even though this is dubbed like public services, they were also talking about, places of worship that there might be any sort of private company that also might provide a service. Public transportation, similar thing, where we're talking about not only the quote traditional public health or public transit things like buses and railways and light rail and things like that. But maybe if there's you know, a taxi stand or bicycle lanes, things like that, transit's probably a better word for it than public transit. And then health, related to the various health resources that are in the area, you know, clinics, dialysis centers, hospitals, things like that. And when you've gone through and maybe clicked one of those and answered all of the questions, you'll be prompted to either complete another section of the survey, or you can save your answers and exit and come back and maybe do that another time. Because as we saw before, there is that question where it says you can update your survey. So if you went through and you answered only questions about industry or physical disrepair, then that might be all that you want to, you might be able to update and do something about the, you know, the housing or whatever it might be. So we try to, you know, use a different types of questions to get different kinds of answers. So, you know, essentially this is a survey instrument. But we have a number of different inputs that you might have. So there's yes and no questions that might ask about the presence of something. So, you know, is there a stop sign on the block? Yes or no. And so that has the ability to tell you, you know, basically a dichotomous variable. Yep, it's there. No, it's not. But the count question might be able to tell you a bit more. Is there a stop sign? Yes. How many, right? Is there a speed bump? Yes. How many? It has a little bit more ability to describe what we see. And the thing that really has the most description of what we see is this fill in the blank here. So let's say, you know, what types of businesses are in the area? You might be able to fill in the blank there. And that can really, you know, tell you a lot about a community. You know, if the business is a farmer's market versus, you know, payday lender, thing like that, something that's you know, a predatory business, something like that, that can really tell you about whether or not this community is trying to support the health of its residents. And the last thing that we have, and it's not 100% finished yet, and we're, as I said, this app has been in development for a number of years, and we were trying to have a photo, because as you can see, we kind of are going up and increasing in the amount of specificity of information that you can get. And the old saying is a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? So able to take a picture, you know, you can tell me, you know, that there's a payday lender, but until maybe you show me a picture of what it looks like, you know, maybe it has the potential to help some people. But if it's a really predatory business, you might be able to tell that more by the types of signage that's inside, things like that. So we're really trying to get more information that using the photo feature we can. So here's some of the tips for the block assessment. We want people to be alert because you might be walking around an area, especially if it's an area that doesn't have speed limit signs posted or something like that. And if you're staring down at your phone or you're staring at your tablet, you know, we want to make sure that everybody is safe. It's important to work with a partner or team, I think, for a number of reasons. Maybe so that everybody makes sure that you're paying attention, but also this is a good way to connect with people in your community. It has the ability, like I said, so you can build power through these processes, and also talk about what you finished, debrief, better understand what it is that you are going through, and better understand your environment by talking about it with people. So I'm going to see if we have any questions, and then I'm going to take some time to review the tool a little bit, give a quick demonstration. But maybe now I'll take some time to answer some questions. So let's see. I see that we have a question in here from Ashley MP. Since you mentioned this tool was designed for urban and suburban communities, is your team using CBPR principles to co-design a tool for rural EJ communities? Is your app designed to be used offline, and who owns and can access the data that the community submits? These are great questions. And also, is the tool available for use outside of the DMV? To answer the last question, yes, this tool can be used anywhere. It's as long as you can access it through the link. So the question that you have about co-designing a tool for rural EJ communities, we have not done that yet. This is more me mentioning that we recognize that this doesn't have as much utility for rural communities at the moment. So maybe in the future, we will do this or update it in such a way that would be more responsive. But we have currently not done any steps in that direction. But I would like to point out that this tool as it exists now, and this is certainly something that is very integral to the process of development. This is not just a tool that has been developed by the CEEJH lab, but or sorry, the Center for CEEJH. We're recently been upgraded to a center, but was code created with Chris Melendez from Portstown Environmental Action provided a lot of feedback on this tool as well. And we have done a number of demonstrations for community members and providing feedback there. So this is not just our tool that we have made without doing those CBPR processes as well. So this is a co-created tool as it exists. The second question that you have is your app designed to be used offline? Yes, the idea is that you can without an internet connection, if you're in an area that doesn't have connectivity, the idea is that you will be able to just save the survey offline, be able to fill it out, and then if you're able to connect to internet, or if we're working, working in a community where you might have to go to the library for internet, things like that, then you can resume some of the functionality there. And who owns and can access the data that the community submits? It currently lives, because this tool is still very much in development. It's in a database that is accessible to any of the users. So you're able to not only see the data that you have submitted, but you're able to see data that everybody has submitted. So it's basically all the data that's been generated is open source and anybody can use it for anything. Just as it stands now, it does live the data lives on a server that the University of Maryland, that CEEJH has, or it's hosted on a cloud service that we are the ones who administrate it. Just because there's not that's a workaround that we haven't necessarily gotten to yet is, all right, is there an ability to host a huge amount of data in a way that you don't have to pay for it in any way? And that's something that actually is very, very difficult to do. So it exists on a server or a cloud-based service that we have to pay for. And I don't think that we want to burden people with paying for cloud storage or anything like that. But the idea is that anybody can use the data. The data is crowd generated and crowd accessible. So yes, there's accessibility there. And I think that the idea is also that as more and more people use this tool and generate more and more data, there's more power in it too. So let's say that you're a community, I'll once again use Baltimore. You live in, Southwest Baltimore, an industrial part of town, and you can look at other users who have used it maybe in East Baltimore, other users who have done data collection in north parts of the city, and you can make comparisons and really show and demonstrate, the fact that maybe, we have a disproportionate burden of industrial facilities here compared to other parts in the city. And so therefore we need to do something about that. We need better protections. We need more resources, things like that. So the data is publicly available so that you can do those kinds of comparisons. You can do comparisons, across even larger geographic boundaries. Because like I said, it's not just for the DMV. You could compare, your block in Baltimore to a block in Newark, New Jersey, or something like that. So yes, thank you, Ashley. Appreciate those questions. After the information is captured, what happens next? This is a great question and something that has come up a number of times, and when we've gone and worked with community groups, the question is here. So what happens then? So one of the things that I want to be clear about, and I think is important to be clear about, is that, you know, this is just a tool. This is not, unfortunately, a solution to the fact that with information, you know, having the proper data and the proper information doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have the desired outcomes. But hopefully what we can do is that this is something that can be in the toolkit of communities who are trying to demonstrate that they have environmental justice concerns, and use it, you know, as a support for whatever work that they might do. So I think that I envision that you can use this, you know, do data collection, demonstrate that the area that you are living in has a number of environmental disamenities. And instead of, you know, just providing direct testimony, you have, you know, something quantifiable. So you can go and do direct testimony, describe your experiences, etc. But then also say, and I can tell you that what I'm, you know, if you don't believe me, I can show you that, you know, where I live compared to where this other community lives, we are under-resourced, and I can just demonstrate that by the fact that there's disparities in the environment, which I was able to capture using this tool. So there are still certainly the pitfalls that come with trying to make any meaningful change, right? That I don't think that this is in itself going to be the end all be all, and you still need to, you know, organize and work with your communities and come up, you know, and fight essentially. But this is, you know, another tool that can be used in that fight, in those processes. So that's what I think is important to note here. I may have missed this, but you have an example of the output. I will show you that, Gonzalo, when I demonstrate the tool. We still have about 15 minutes left, so I'm hoping to get into the tool and I can show you what the output looks like. But the tool right now is in its like very beta version, and we're hoping to have it so you can just click a button and it downloads a you know, a document either to your, you know, sends it to your email, or if you're on your computer, it downloads it right to your computer that has a whole list of all of the questions that you answered. Dawood, I will definitely show you the URL again. And yes, oh, Gonzalo, yes, you shared the link, so great. Okay, and then I see Ashley, another question. I joined a bit late. Was there a specific data gap identified to create this app by the center? For example, there are a lot of federal databases, so the goal was something more user-friendly. Yeah, so the goal is user-friendly. It does run on this community science principle as well, CBPR principle of doing data collection, utilizing data that you have generated. But additionally, I do think that there are a number of databases that maybe aren't at the same geographic scale. So like some stuff exists at the block level for sure. There's like census at the block group level, but now we're at the neighborhood block level. And also questions about, you know, the amount of trees, the amount of potholes, things that vary and can vary over short periods of time. You have the ability to show how something maybe has changed even in 2 months, and the fact that, you know, maybe a big storm came through with lots of ice and now the streets all cracked. So yeah, this is, I think that's something that's worth noting, is the immediacy of it, and additionally, the fact that it maybe collects information on some things that are not collected by other types of tools or surveys. So, yep. Thank you, Ashley. So, oh yeah, I'm gonna now go into the tool a little bit, do a demonstration. I'll share my screen again. And we can, happy to answer some questions at the end, though I am aware of our time here. So great, so here we are. This is it. We can see here, log in, sign up as I demonstrated before, and now that says you can also view the data hub to view and analyze data that users have submitted. So I'm going to log in. I'm going to enter my username, password. And here we can see the various options: the start a new assessment, update an assessment, and the data hub. So I'm going to go to the data hub first because I believe there was somebody who wanted to see what the output looked like. So this is a feature that is the view by address. So as I said before, we're trying to have this be completely open. We're not quite there yet, as you can see. It's grayed out, but what we'll be able to do is, if you're curious about an area to see if it has been assessed, let's say that you want to make that comparison, you can maybe you can type in the address or a general area where you might be looking, and it'll bring you a map and points on the map where different blocks that have been assessed. So let's say that you can't even find something on the very specific block that you want to look at, but maybe you could find something nearby that people have assessed. But I'm going to show you the output because I believe Gonzalo asked for that. And here are all of the various assessments that I've done. I've done one in Newark. I've done a couple actually at the same address in Baltimore, some other addresses. So this is my childhood home. And we can see here that none of the questions here are answered because I didn't do this part of the survey. So this is what the output looks like, as you can see. So it's basically just returns the entirety of the survey. So stores, I didn't answer this one either. Let's see, industry, didn't answer here. Didn't answer this part of the survey. Let's go to try to find where I did answer. Maybe I did health. Oh, I didn't do anything on this one. Let's try again. Let's try another. Okay, here's an example of where I actually completed the survey. I guess I didn't finish, but as you can see, this is what the output looks like. And as I said, what we're hoping to have is a button that when you scroll down here, it would say download CSV or download PDF or whatever it might be. But for the moment, this is how you can get your entire survey. You just can copy and paste it, and there you have it. And you can put it into an Excel spreadsheet if you want to do any sort of analysis. But this is certainly something that we are working on, and there are limitations here. So I'm going to open up the chat. I see something here. And we have a question, or maybe a comment from Ashley. For EJ communities that live literally on the fence line of the industry, having open data can pose a safety concern or allow an industry to rally in opposition to their own data collection efforts, etc. Does the center provide strategies or referrals to others that can support communities about how to use the tool in mind with these factors in mind? Yes, I think that's certainly a very good point. I think that a lot of industries obviously have lawyers. They will retaliate to anybody perhaps posing that they are doing wrong by the community. And I think that's something that's very serious to bring up. And it can pose a threat, certainly. But I think that really the kind of data that is being collected here is it's a lot of questions related to presence of things and non-presence of things. So if you were to, for instance, if you're living on the fence line of an industry and you're collecting data that says, is there a factory on this block? That's public information already. And I don't think that that is going to necessarily pose a threat, especially because there is anonymity in the way that this is collected. They're not going to be able, the app, they do not know who is collecting or who is the person who's surveying. You don't have to live on the block. It could be that somebody has come and used the tool from another neighborhood and just was walking past and thought, I'm going to survey this block. So I think that there are some protections that are already kind of built into the mechanism of the tool, and that is that it's an anonymous collection. There are also some limitations with that, of course, but I also do think that insofar as we've used this tool before, it has been with community-based organizations, and it doesn't come without a disclaimer that yes, if this is something that we are considering doing, if we are to, for instance, be talking about this within relation to traffic-related air pollution, the powers that benefit from the fact that there's a trucking route through a particular community are definitely going to push back. But I think that most communities who are working against these issues understand those things as well. And then I see a follow-up. Is the university data server privy to public record requests that could remove the anonymity of users? Yeah, I mean, I think that the fact that this is subject to, it is on a server that, or I should say a cloud-based system, I think that that's certainly a consideration. But once again, the only data that is really collected is that could ever tie anybody to this would be an email address, in which case certainly something that we could do would have people, encourage people to sign up with a anonymized email address that you can make very easily through Gmail for free. So, all right, I see Dawood. Is there a way to print out the questions so someone like me could take the list outside and answer on paper and then enter into the app? Yes, certainly. We could definitely do that, Dawood. And I think a way, it's not exactly easy, or I shouldn't say easy. It's a little bit of a hack. In the same way that I was able to copy and paste all of these answers, you can take this, copy and paste it, put it into a document and print it out. Additionally, Dawood, if ever you just want the questions as they exist, you can send me personally an email at jrgal, just like this, at umd.edu, and I can send you all of the questions. Additionally, I think that probably Yan and Rachel could do the same thing as well, who I believe you are currently involved with the air quality monitoring projects on. So that's great. Watch out for my email. I'll keep my eye on your inbox, Dawood, or my inbox. So yeah, this is how the tool works. And this is that output that we were talking about. But I'm going to go back and kind of just show here, start a new assessment. We're going to do an address. So I'm going to an address closest to my vantage point. I've kind of exhausted this, so I have to sort of make up new addresses. But let's say here we are, 129 West 29th Street, or 123 West 29th Street, Baltimore, Maryland. That's the one that came up first. So I'm going to say that it is hot outside. And so here we can see how this might work. So I'm going to go through, and you can see the various sections. We have industry, disorder, housing, like I said. And you can see that some of these, we have way more questions than others. So there's 27 questions for the general section. Health, there's only 6 questions. So some of these, depending on what you're looking at and what your question might be, it might be very easy for you to do the entire survey of the block very quickly. So specifically, if you're on 123 West 29th Street, you might know that that's an area that there's no stores at all. So you won't ever have to answer this question, and you can just use the sorry, the domains that are relevant to whatever your questions might be. So if you're looking at, I think that the area where I live has poor housing stock in comparison to an area that receives, way more investment, et cetera, then you could use these questions here. If you are concerned about a polluting industry, only 7 questions here, et cetera. So I'm going to just do this health section in the last 5 minutes that we have. And a lot of these, the idea is that they're used in tandem with other assessments around the area, because, in the case of this, are there any dentist office on this block? The answer is no, so I will leave it unanswered. Next, medical clinics or doctor's offices, none. Pharmacies, including those in grocery stores and drugstores? I can say yes, there is, because there's a pharmacy in the area. Rehab or detox facilities, none. Dialysis facilities, 0. And hospitals, 0. And that's the question. I mean, that's that whole section related to health. So like that's a very quick demonstration of how the survey instrument works, how My Block Counts works. And yeah, I think that there's certain sections such as this. How often are you going to encounter the dentist office on the block? Not very often, but if you have a dentist office on your block, you can see that would be a big amenity. And also potentially knowing an area where there is a dentist office nearby to you is also important in terms of your individual health. Anyway, I guess, does anybody have any other questions? We have about 3 minutes left. I'm going to put in the chat the link so that you can use the tool yourself. So here is the link. And I want to thank you all for being here today. Thanks for attending. I appreciate all of you. I appreciate the very, very good questions. I hope that you see the utility in this tool. Also, very welcome to any feedback that anybody might have. That's also a part of this ongoing process, is making sure that what we're making is good. What we're making is something that's useful to communities and can help work towards environmental justice. So I just want to thank you all, and have a good rest of your afternoon. I know that the next session that is coming up, I believe, is the Donors of Color session, talking about funding environmental justice, funding equity, and I'm excited for that at 3:40. So take care, everybody.